The concrete didn't fail all at once. It answered. We were 3 steps inside the sealed sublevel when my boot hit a spot that rang hollow. Too clean, too uniform. I froze. The flashlight beam slid across the floor and settled on a hairline crack that shouldn't have been there, not under a reinforced slab. I tapped the surface with my knuckle. The sound came back empty, like knocking on a door that opened into nothing. We marked the coordinate and stepped wide. The crack spread without noise, not collapsing. Opening. A square of concrete dropped an inch and stopped, revealing layered ice beneath, gray and matte, cut straight like it had been measured. No melt, no steam, just a void under the base. The geophone spiked the moment the slab shifted. Same pattern, same point. By the time we pulled back, our radios were clean, but our logs weren't. At first light, access was revoked.
This channel documents frontline accounts like this one. Subscribe for future reports.
In February 1948, our detachment was staged out of a small Army facility in Alaska to inventory and secure a decommissioned site that hadn't been used since the end of the war. On paper, it was simple. Confirm the perimeter seals, verify the sublevels were empty, and file the condition report before spring thaw complicated access. The base sat miles off the nearest maintained road, half buried in drifted snow with only the upper structures visible. Power was supposed to be dead. It wasn't, at least not entirely. Emergency fluorescents still glowed in a few corridors, dim and steady, like someone had left the place on standby. We weren't sent in as engineers. We were sent in because the last civilian survey team refused to go below, citing floor instability they couldn't explain. They left behind one note on a map, hollow, underlined twice, right over the sublevel we were about to enter. We entered the sublevel on a short line, me on point with the flashlight, Carter behind me on security, and Haynes carrying the geophone case like it was a suitcase full of glass. The hatch into the lower corridor had been sealed with a heavy bar and 2 bolts. Neither rusted the way they should have been. The hardware looked maintained. That was our first problem. Nobody was supposed to be maintaining anything. The air down there was dry and cold enough to sting the inside of my nose. Not winter cold. A refrigeration cold that didn't belong under several feet of insulated concrete. Our breath showed in thin, controlled clouds. The corridor itself was plain. Poured walls, conduit runs, matte paint, no shine, no new footprints. Just that dim, weak fluorescent buzz overhead that made everything look like an old document. We moved slow, checking for signs of forced entry, checking corners, marking door positions. Every few yards, Haynes stopped to set the geophone base on the floor and listen. It wasn't a fancy setup, just a field unit and a chart drum, but it gave us something we could quantify. After 10 minutes, we had numbers. A steady baseline hum in the building, low and constant like distant machinery. That baseline was wrong, because the place had no running machinery. At the first intersection, the floor changed. The concrete looked the same, but the sound under our boots didn't. It turned hollow in a clean, geometric way. Sharp transition, like we'd stepped over an invisible seam. Carter noticed it too. He didn't speak. He just shifted his weight back, eyes on my feet like he expected the slab to give. I crouched and swept the flashlight low. The beam caught tiny cracks I hadn't seen standing up. Fine lines running straight, not spiderwebbed. Stress cracks don't do straight. They branch. They follow aggregate. These looked drafted. "Haynes," I said, and he was already kneeling, geophone on the seam. He cranked the drum. The pen traced a simple pattern. Not random noise. Regular pulses spaced out like a slow metronome. Same amplitude. Same interval. We stared at the chart until the rhythm became undeniable. "Could be ice load shifting," Carter offered. "Then it wouldn't be that clean," Haynes said, voice low. "And it wouldn't repeat like a clock." We marked the coordinate with a grease pencil and backed off it, widening our spacing. Our orders were clear. Observe, document, do not damage structural elements. But there's a difference between do not damage and do not touch. We had to verify stability. We had to decide whether the corridor was safe to traverse. I took a steel rod from my pack and tapped the slab near the seam. The sound came back empty, like the floor wasn't attached to anything beneath it. I tapped again, 2 inches over. Same hollow response. Then I tapped outside the seam. The tone changed immediately. Solid, Dense, normal concrete. It wasn't a weak floor. It was a floor over a void. We proceeded by stepping on the solid side only, hugging the wall and keeping our weight distributed. And as we moved, the seam moved with us, not physically shifting under our boots, but revealing itself in new places. The hollow zone stayed centered on the same point in the building, as if the geometry was fixed and we were the ones orbiting it. That should have been comforting, predictable. It wasn't. Predictable meant designed. We found the first hairline fracture at the edge of the zone. It ran straight for 3 feet, then turned at a right angle. No debris, no spalling, just a clean break in a slab that should have fractured irregularly. Carter set his flashlight down and pressed his glove against the crack. "Cold," he said, and the word came out flat. I felt it too when I knelt. Cold bleeding up through the concrete, a steady draw like a vent. But there was no airflow, no sound, just temperature. Haynes put the geophone directly over the fracture. The pen spiked immediately, then settled into the same repeating pattern, only stronger. That was when the slab changed height, not a collapse, not a sudden drop. A controlled movement, an inch, maybe 2, like a heavy panel settling onto stops. The crack widened without noise. No grinding aggregate, no snap. The building didn't shake, the fluorescence didn't flicker. We stepped back hard, weapons low but ready, because our bodies reacted before our brains did. The opening revealed what was beneath. Layered permafrost ice, matte and gray, cut in planes like it had been carved with a square tool. It should have been messy. Frozen dirt, gravel, frost heave. Instead it looked arranged, and under the ice there was darkness, not a shadow, a literal void under the base. Haynes leaned forward, careful, and lowered the geophone's cable into the opening. The instrument didn't hear the void, it amplified it. The chart pen began to trace a higher frequency tremor riding on the old pulses, as if something down there had noticed we'd opened the floor. Our radios stayed clear. That was almost worse. Nothing jammed, nothing hissed. We had full comms to the surface team. But the moment I keyed my handset to report, my throat tightened and I paused. Not from fear, from the sense that saying it out loud would make it real. I forced the words anyway. Sub-level floor compromised at marked coordinate. Under slab ice and void present. Recommending no further entry until engineering assessment. There was a delay on the reply that shouldn't have been there. Not static. Silence. Then, copy, hold position. We did what we were trained to do. We held. We watched the opening. We logged measurements. Crack width, temperature at the edge, pulse interval on the chart. Haynes ran the geophone again at the same spot and got the same pattern. Identical. Repeatable. Objective. Then our flashlight beam hit something that made my stomach drop. The edges of the slab weren't fractured all the way through. They looked scored, like the concrete had been pre-cut from below. Carter saw it too. He didn't speak. He just shifted his rifle a fraction higher and took one slow step back from the edge like the floor might decide to open again. The order came down 15 minutes later, blunt and final. Withdraw. Do not leave equipment. Seal the hatch. We complied. But when we reached the upper level and I opened my notebook to confirm our timings, half the page was blank. The pencil marks were still pressed into the paper, indentations without graphite, as if the record had been lifted off the surface and taken somewhere else. We should have turned it into a clean withdrawal, seal the hatch, walk out, file the report, let engineers argue about permafrost and bad concrete. That's what I expected. But the base didn't let the moment end neatly. On the way back through the corridor, Haynes asked to take one last reading. He didn't say it like a request. He said it like a reflex, the way you check a pulse even after the patient is gone. Carter shook his head once. I should have backed him. Instead, I gave Haynes 10 seconds. He set the geophone on the solid side of the seam, not over the opening. The chart drum turned. The pen traced the same slow pulses for 3 beats, then stopped. Not a mechanical failure. A dead flat line. At that exact second, the fluorescent above us dimmed, like someone rolled the voltage down with a careful hand. The corridor didn't go dark. It went quiet in a different way. Even our breathing sounded farther away. I stepped to the edge of the marked zone without thinking. The cold rising through the slab wasn't steady anymore. It came in waves, pressure without wind, a pushing up from below. My flashlight beam trembled over the crack we'd widened earlier. The crack was closed. Not sealed with debris, not hidden. closed as if the concrete had slid back into place. The hairline line was still there, but the gap was gone. No dust ridge, no crumble, just a seam, too straight, running a perfect right angle. Haynes whispered. It reset. The geophone pen moved again, hard. The pulses returned, stronger than before, and between them there was a second rhythm, tighter, like a coded overlay. It wasn't a sound you could hear in the air. It was vibration in the slab, a message written into the building. Carter raised his hand for us to freeze. He was staring at the floor where my flashlight struck. Fine powder, ice crystals, was lifting off the concrete in thin lines, aligning itself into concentric arcs around the seam. The pattern was too clean to be random settling. Then the floor answered us. A single measured knock from below, one impact, heavy and deliberate, transmitted through the concrete into our boots. Not a collapse, not a shift, a contact. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Every training instinct we had said the same thing. Whatever was under that slab could control the boundary. It could open it, close it, and signal through it. I keyed my radio to the surface team. "We have movement," I started. The handset clicked. My voice didn't carry. The channel stayed open, but no audio went out. Haynes tried his set. Same result. Clear reception, no transmission. As if the base had decided what could leave and what couldn't. Carter grabbed my sleeve and pulled me back from the seam. We withdrew without running because running would have meant panic, and panic would have meant we didn't come back at all. Behind us, the fluorescent light steadied, and the slab went silent like nothing had happened. But the chart paper in Haynes's hands kept moving, the pen still tracing that second rhythm, right up until we sealed the hatch. We reached the surface level and found 2 MPs we hadn't seen on the way in. They weren't part of our detail. No insignia I recognized, no small talk, just faces set like they'd been waiting for a specific sentence. One of them asked for our notebooks before we'd even cleared the stairwell. I handed mine over. The pages were still indented where I'd written timings, coordinates, crack width, but the graphite was gone in long sections, erased without smearing. Haynes opened the geophone case to show the chart roll. The paper looked intact until the MP unspooled it and held it up to the light. Whole segments were blank. The drum had turned, the pen had pressed. You could see the grooves, but the ink line vanished in the same places my notes had vanished, as if the record had been lifted off the surface instead of rubbed away. They took our radios next. Both handsets received fine. Neither would transmit from inside the base. Outside, they worked again, like the rule only applied below the slab. An officer we hadn't been briefed on walked in while we were still explaining. He didn't ask what we thought it was. He didn't ask if we were sure. He asked one question. Did it respond? Carter answered before I could stop him. Yes. That was the moment the operation changed shape. We were moved to a heated shed near the perimeter and ordered through decontamination. Boots, gloves, packs, despite no exposure warning on any detector. They photographed the soles of our boots and scraped a fine gray frost from the tread into sealed bags. At 04:10, still dark, a truck convoy arrived without lights. They rolled a steel seal over the hatch and welded it in place. When the sun came up, the entrance was gone under fresh fill and new snow fencing. By morning, our access was revoked. By noon, the base didn't exist on any map we were allowed to see, and the only instruction we were given in writing was 3 words, stamped in red: do not re-enter. 2 weeks later, I was called in to sign a revised report. The new version described routine structural instability and permafrost settling. No mention of pulses, no mention of the floor resetting. The coordinate we marked was replaced with a blank grid square and my name was misspelled. Haynes tried to keep the original chart paper. He swore he hid it inside his coat lining. When he showed it to me, the grooves were still there, pressed deep into the roll, but the line was gone. Access stayed revoked. The hatch stayed sealed. And I learned something simple about that base. It could decide what stayed buried and what didn't.